13 civil society organizations under the Civil Society Working Group on Transparency and Accountability have come together to submit a position paper titled The Pace and Fate of Security Sector Reforms in the Gambia. The organization recognized and commended the government of the Gambia for its commitment outlined in the National Security Policy 2019 and the Security Sector Reform Strategy 2020 to 2024, both designed to establish a professional, accountable, and rights-respecting security sector in the country. Isa Sani, Program Assistant at the Women's Association for Victims of Empowerment, stated that they commend the government for establishing the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission and for formulating the government's white paper on SSR agenda. However, he also pointed out that there are still significant challenges within the security sector.
We recognize the government's adoption of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission recommendations and the formulation of the white paper on SSR implementation as significant policy milestones. The ongoing partnerships and funding support from international bodies, including the United Nations and other key stakeholders, demonstrates a commendable dedication to reform. However, despite these efforts, tangible reforms have been slow and uneven, reflecting enduring challenges such as political interference, inadequate coordination, and resistance within security institutions. The gap between policy and practice threatens to erode Gambians' confidence in the security apparatus and puts at risk the hard-won democratic gains and national peace.
The position paper strongly calls for urgent, measurable actions rooted in transparency, accountability, and the inclusive participation of civil society and citizens in the SSR process. It urges the establishment of fully independent oversight bodies, comprehensive training reforms for security personnel, transparent recruitment and promotion practices, and the development of technology to strengthen accountability and community engagement. Sirifo Jabate, Program Officer at the Shelo Sande Foundation, also lists some of the key problems they observe.
Some of the problems that we have identified are as follows. One is the slow and inconsistent security sector reform strategy implementation. Despite a high funding from international donors, because Malagan has reported, I think last month or so, that the funders have injected close to $7.1 billion to security sector reform alone. If this is something to go by, what we are seeing in practice is then very, 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 very disheartening. $7.1 billion is not small money. That's a lot of money, right? If that money is spent on reforming the laws, reforming the policies, and so on, then it's not reflecting on the ground operations of these institutions, especially the Gambia Police Force. So we have identified that there's a slow and inconsistent SSR implementation. We have also identified that there's an entrenched police brutality. It seems as if this is a state policy, that the police need to be brutal, because that's how we are seeing it. We've also identified weak accountability system. There's a weak accountability system. These officers are not held accountable. From 2018 to date, very few officers are held accountable, because one university student was stabbed at the UTG, around the UTG, by one Lamin Trawaler. In fact, that Lamin Trawaler was charged, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years. That's few of the measures the government has taken, which we commend them for, right? But there's a weak accountability system in place. And this weak accountability system in place is because we lacked independent oversight, right? And there is high, in our view, political interference in police leadership. There's also poor and irregular internal disciplinary mechanisms that is in place. So there's also, if you look at our prisons, dilapidated detention facilities. Our prison is not fit for human habitation, right? If you visit the prisons, you will know that that place is not fit for human habitation. So the representative of the Ministry of Justice was indicating that there's a prison bill that has some progressive provisions. There's also a failure to reform police culture, because this is a culture, just as we have, in our communities, Culture is not easy to change. Culture is something that people live by. Culture is something that people live for. People can die for culture. So there's a need to change the culture of brutality. There's a need to change the culture of use of force, the culture of arbitrary arrest, the culture of unnecessary detentions. So that culture needs to change. And we identify that as a problem, that there's an unchanged culture. Right? So if these cultures don't change, there will be impunity, and our democratic consolidation will actually be undermined.
Furthermore, he highlighted significant recommendations to be implemented to strengthen the security sector.
Culture of arbitrary arrest, the culture of unnecessary detentions. So that culture needs to change, and we identify that as a problem, that there's an unchanged culture. Right? So if these cultures don't change, there will be impunity, and our democratic consolidation will actually be undermined. So having identified these gaps and having relied on these strategic documents, we are able to do a few recommendations. One of them is that there should be a strengthened accountability mechanisms in place. This is to establish an independent civil oversight body for police accountability and perhaps other security sector institutions, right? Second is to insulate police leadership from political interference. There should be, a kind of lack of interference with the police leadership by the political class. Because if the police is appearing in such a way that there is a political interference in what they do, then there's going to be a problem. So there is need for us to insulate political, leadership from interference. This is to mean that, the new police bill should have provisions to indicate that the appointment and the approval of the appointment of the IGP should be given to different institutions. For example, if the IGP is appointed or if the IGP is nominated by the president, then the nomination must be really approved by the National Assembly, so that we have, a kind of some security, in the tenure of the IGP. So there should also be a shift from a force to a service-oriented policing model, right? So there has been recommendations that there need to be a change from the Gambia Police Force to Gambia Police Service. This will inculcate in them a sense of service, a sense of serving the community, a sense of serving the state, that is the people, than the political class or than the few leaders. So there's a need for us to change that. And there's also a need for the police to have a mandatory course on crowd and conflict de-escalation strategy. There's that need for that to be inculcated in their curriculum at the police training school or any training school. This will give them a sense of really ensuring that they respect human rights, they respect the people that they went on to secure. Because if you don't have the knowledge, it's going to be difficult for you to be able to behave when you're on the ground. So that disconnect is there. There's a need for that. We strongly recommend. We strongly also recommend that the police adopt technology. Example, body cameras, CCTV, drones, and so on and so forth. Because if these things are there, really, there will be easy accountability. There will be easy detecting and identifying who is involved in what and to what extent are you involved in a certain brutality. So technology should be adopted and it should be used.
They express optimism that this document will contribute meaningfully to the national disclosure on security reforms and inform policies and programs that ensure lasting peace, justice, and democratic resilience for all Gambians. Reporting for GTTV News, I am Amijalo.